Welcome to the Woman's Current. Is the tide turning? I'm Sylvia Beckerman.
And I'm Molly Wadzeck. Together, we're exploring how women support women across generations, experiences, and perspectives.
From baby boomers to millennials and beyond, we're asking, are we lifting each other up? And how do we keep the tide moving forward?
Each week, we'll dive into real conversations with women who are reshaping the currents and reflect on what those stories mean for all of us.
So let's dive in. Let's get started.
I thought to myself, I've had this kind of knowledge and ability for 12 years, but I did not have the strength to express it. I did not own my stature. And it was so easy to own it as a man, the entire world tells you to. But as a woman, I didn't really own it, I don't think, until I ran for public office 3 years ago. I think that's the point at which it was like, wait a minute, I actually have more knowledge, much more wisdom than I had as a male. And I was a national leader as a male. Why wouldn't I be a national leader now?
Our guest today is Paula Stone Williams. Paula is a pastor, counselor, author, and internationally known speaker whose story has inspired audiences around the world. For decades, Paula served as a leader in the evangelical church before coming out as a transgender woman at the age of 60. Since then, she shared her experience with honesty, humor, and compassion, speaking at over 100 conferences and events, including 5 TED Talks, which have been viewed millions of times. I love them. Paula's work explores what gender teaches us about power, privilege, and empathy, big word, and how understanding both sides of the divide can help us create a more equitable world. We're so honored to have Paula here today to talk about perspective, identity, and what true understanding between men and women might look like. Paula, welcome.
Good to be with you.
To start, you've lived on both sides of the gender divide. What did that teach you about power and empathy?
Well, I think the truth is I will not live long enough to lose my white male entitlement. I brought it with me when I transitioned. So I don't know that I will ever have anything close to a cisgender experience of the same as a female. But I have learned so much. Yeah, it's been quite a lesson for me. My former wife and I are still close. We're both therapists. We work together. And I think maybe at the end of the second year or so, she came to me and said, yeah, I'm, you know, it's okay. It was okay for you to say, I'm so sorry. I never understood. She said, I'm just getting a little tired of it because, you said it so many times over the last 2 years. Because there are just so many things you just can't know. Like I said in my first TED Talk, there's no way a well-educated white male can understand how much the culture is tilted in his favor because that's all he's ever known and all he ever will know. And conversely, there's no way for a woman to understand the full import of that because being a woman's all she's ever known. I mean, she may have an inkling that she's working twice as hard for 83% as much, but really, I don't think she has any idea how much more difficult life is for her than it is for the guy in the Brooks Brothers jacket in the office across the hall. I know. I was that guy.
What surprised you the most when you began moving through the world as a woman?
I think the most surprising thing to me, there are several different things, but I think the most surprising was how a world that had once taken me seriously and never questioned my competence suddenly just saw me as stupid. I was brought onto the board of a large nonprofit. We have a big annual conference. We had a new CEO, and we were talking about whether or not we wanted to have the CEO speak and get a keynote for the conference. And I said, well, she's not a seasoned speaker. It might be better if we just interview her. But if you want her to give a keynote, I'm happy to coach her. At which point, a powerful white man in the room said, well, if we're going to do that, why don't we hire a real coach? So I knew a number of women in the room knew my credentials. Nobody spoke up for me. That's another thing. And I can say what I wanted to say. I wanted to say I've done 3 TED Talks that have had 10 million views. I'm a speaker's ambassador for TED. I'm a coach for the largest TEDx in North America. I've taught speech in 3 universities, 2 in the United States, 1 in Europe. I have a thriving speakers coaching practice. What about that does not make me a real coach? But by then I'd already learned you don't say anything, because if you say something, well, now you're just that woman.
You're a complainer.
Mhm.
uh, Paula,
I'm
something
thinking
that's
I'm thinking more of the B word.
oh,
Oh, yeah,
uh,
I've been
I,
called that.
yeah, I mean, what woman hasn't? Welcome to womanhood when you finally get called the B word. Something that stood out to me in your book was how you describe feeling smaller, right? Physically, socially, after transitioning. I'm just been wondering, how did that change what you expected of yourself, or what you, I guess, demanded from not the world, but like the spaces that you are now occupying as a woman? Um, yeah, can you just describe a little bit about that physical and social sense of feeling smaller that it really resonated with me?
I've done probably literally hundreds of interviews. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. It's a good one. You do diminish, and the cause of the diminishment is yourself, and it's fed by the culture of which you are a part. Like I said in that first TED Talk, when you're told over and over that you don't know what you're talking about, you finally get to the point that you think, okay, I must not know what I'm talking about. And it took me a few years, I think, before I really even understood that was happening. Recently, I've been doing a lot of speaking in very intellectually rigorous venues, let's say. And I have watched as people have been very taken with the talks, and the Q&A would just go on forever. And I thought to myself, I've had this kind of knowledge and ability for 12 years, but I did not have the strength to express it. I did not own my stature. And it was so easy to own it as a man. The entire world tells you to. But as a woman, I didn't really own it, I don't think, until I ran for public office 3 years ago. I think that's the point at which it was like, wait a minute, I I actually have more knowledge, much more wisdom than I had as a male. And I was a national leader as a male. Why wouldn't I be a national leader now?
Because your knowledge hasn't changed.
Well, it's
It
increased
it
exponentially.
right. And so your sense of authority and credibility, it sounds like it took you 12 years to really get a grasp on that. Um,
Well, there's a
and
word
really
you
use
there's a word you use there that's an interesting one, authority. Most people work from the level of the human ego. And by ego, I mean from the Jungian perspective, from Carl Jung's perspective. To
Mhm.
Freud, the ego sat between the the more primitive id and the more moralistic superego. For Jung, the ego was the conscious self. It's the part of you that is aware of everything going on in the world. And the human ego is interested in just two things. Only thing it cares about are power and safety, because its primary purpose is to keep you alive.
Right.
And so it's always focused on safety and an adequate amount of power to make sure you keep safe. And most people work at the level of ego most of the time. When you're working at the level of ego, you tend to diminish yourself. When I first transitioned, life was not at all safe for me. I think it's understandable that I reverted to working from the level of ego. But beneath the level of ego is the subconscious self. And the subconscious self in humans is far more in touch with the truth of things. That's why we as therapists always say to people, what is your gut telling you about this? Because the subconscious self is in touch with your body far more than your conscious self is. It's also why we ask you, how do you feel right now? Instead of what are you thinking right now? And it's also why people will answer us with what they're thinking. You have to stop them, redirect them. say, no, that's not what I ask. I need to know how you feel. And then I will ask them, where do you feel it in your body? And what I'm doing there is getting them out of the left hemisphere of the brain into the right hemisphere. I'm getting them out of the ego and into the unconscious self, the subconscious self, which Jung called the self with a capital S. Most every religion calls the soul. If you are able to work from the level of your soul, then you will always have more to offer the world. The ego is interested in retirement benefits. The soul is here for the ride. And if you're able to work at that soul level, then you really have much more to offer the world.
Paula, I'm sorry, Sylvia. I wanted to
No,
say one thing
no. Go right ahead.
about when you talk about safety, it brought up something to feel like obviously cis people have an inherent safety, cis men experience that more. Our trans brothers and sisters and cis women move through the world understanding that we aren't inherently safe, right? Do you think women's have been socialized or learned to self-edit as a survival skill for that safety? Like, what do you think as a woman, now having had experience life socialized as a man, how has having to change the way you move through the world for your own safety taken away from some of that dynamic that you just talked about?
Yeah, I think one of the things I need to say to preface that is by saying that I feel like I come from the borderlands between genders, from the liminal space between genders. My experience is not a cis female experience.
Yeah.
So for me, there is a combination of the two. But yes, definitely, you don't feel as safe because you are not as safe. And that is frighteningly true for women, has been forever. And right now is also frighteningly true for transgender people, particularly for transgender women. I'm extremely unfortunate in having lost that sense of privilege that allowed me to just, go wherever I wanted to go, anytime I wanted to do it. But I'm extremely fortunate, I think, in really having the level of privilege I do have. And when it comes to how the world receives me, I think I've been misgendered maybe 5 times in 12 years. It just does not happen to me. So I feel just as comfortable going into the Deep South as I do going to Europe, as I do going, to somewhere in the South Pacific. I don't really have any difficulty. My greater problems are when people know me because I'm pretty well known. So I get a lot of hate mail and have even gotten death threats. And so I have to be very aware of my surroundings all the time. Does
Um,
that answer your question, Molly?
Yeah, it does. I think it really sparked something in me when you talked about those two different self-interest with power and safety, right? Because you can't access power in the same way as you
yeah.
could before. It's like this delicate balancing act in our experiences. So yeah, thank you for that. I really love that perspective. It's not something that I'd thought about before with power and control kind of being on a scale a little bit, right? And if you lose some of your safety, then yeah, the
Well,
power goes down
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Paula, you've talked about empathy as something you practice, not just feel. What do you mean by that?
I'm really terribly concerned that a lot of young people today, because of our education system, because of our culture, for the last 500 years, we've been a very left brain heavy culture. And we are not a left brain heavy species. As a species, the right hemisphere of the human brain is primary. The left hemisphere is its emissary. But for the last 500 years, we've been primarily a left hemisphere society. The left hemisphere says, I have a body. The right hemisphere says, I am a body. The left hemisphere is interested in what it knows. The right is interested in what it experiences. The left is interested in categorization and analysis. The right is interested in placing things in context. The left is interested in things. The right is interested in the relationship between people and things. The left is more mechanistic. The right is more organic. And we have an education system that is very heavily focused on the left brain. The entire Western world for the last 500 years has been left brain heavy. What we see with that at this point is that young people right now who are coming of age, going into college particularly, do not have the ability to put information in context, do not have a high EQ or emotional quotient, and most alarming, they do not have the ability to show empathy. Empathy comes from being bodily connected to other people. It comes from being in community, in the same room, in the same place. You know, I was at a playground just a few weeks ago, and there were 3 teenage girls sitting on 3 swings. And I realized after I'd been there for a minute or two, they were texting each other. They were not talking. They were not looking at each other. They were texting each other as they sat on the swing. That is not stimulating the primary hemisphere of the brain, the right hemisphere. And so we really are seeing that empathy is on the wane because there is no bodily connection. We are an embodied species. I'm a part of an amazing group of speakers that most of them are really well known all over the world, and we get together once a month and have conversations. You talk about whatever you happen to be working on, and you're looking for cross-pollination and cross-disciplinary cross-pollination, which we have in this group because you have everything from AI people to people like me. And one of the speakers this summer, one of the ones who wanted advice, said if we can manage to live 7 more years, we can live forever. This is one of the world's leading experts on artificial general intelligence. It was interesting. I think there were 30 people on the call thereabouts. 15 of them were people in AI, tech people, scientists. They're asking technical questions immediately. The other 15 of us are sitting there, I mean, just floored. Until finally a Hollywood producer, she said, but wait a minute, are we not an embodied species? And it was interesting just to see how much half of the room didn't seem to even understand the relevance of the question from my perspective. It could be that they did, but from my perspective, it was very fascinating to see such a different viewpoint there. We are not right now focused on the fact that we're an embodied species. And I think that is really hurting our young people, particularly when it comes to developing empathy.
Paula, what do you think how the ways that digital life shapes the way we empathize now? Like, I think with younger generations, I'm a millennial, so I'm thinking about like the Gen Z after me, and then I'm raising Gen Alpha kids. Generations now seem to be processing empathy online, right? In comments, posts, quick reactions. It can make it feel both immediate but shallow at the same time. And this is not changing. So what are some areas of adaptation that you sense that we might have here with the way we empathize in the digital world?
I think probably Jonathan Haidt in his most recent book, which is about social media and young people, the anxious generation, I think probably he is right now providing us with the best information out there on what to do about it. I have 5 granddaughters between 15 and 18, and all of their parents to this day, from the time they were little, have hours of the day in which they must be offline. And I believe it's important. We usually have them here for about a month in the summertime, and we've done that from the beginning. It made sure that they are face to face with other humans. Again, we are an embodied species.
So true and so scary. I mean, I see that in my son and daughter-in-law and how they're bringing up my grandson, who's only 4, but he spends a lot of time around other children, and they limit the time that he can be in front of any screen, whether a video or whatnot. And to me, socialization was always key to the children, to bringing them up. Not so much learning how to read an encyclopedia, which of course we don't have anymore at the age of 4 or 5, but to learn how to be around other people and learn what that's like and not have all of the technology that we have today.
Well,
Um,
and modeling,
It's
modeling.
interesting. It's interesting. You have a large portion of the nation that believes that autism is caused by vaccines. And ASD, we don't understand everything about its causes. I do not believe it's caused by vaccines. But I do believe that a culture that is no longer embodied is certainly not helping those with the diagnosis of ASD,
no.
particularly males, even more so with males.
Now, do you see, having been in both genders, do you see a difference in empathy between males and females? Because there's been a lot written recently how uh, males lack the empathy trait, gene, or whatever they call it these days.
I believe that we do have a predisposition before experience related to our gender. So I am not someone who believes gender is purely a social construct, that we arrive here not with particular gender outlooks. I believe we have a predisposition before experience that is specific to gender. So, on the whole, I believe that there is a lot about the female body and the female experience that makes empathy something that's very understandable, that we evolved with more empathy for females than males. It's extremely important for the survival of infants and children in the first few years of life, much more so that a mother be able to show empathy, much more so that a mother be able to mirror to a child the goodness of the world. We know that children that do not have that mirroring in the first 2 years of life are those who are likely to have character disorders, major, what we used to call axis 2 diagnoses. So I do believe there are biological differences, again, predispositions before experience. Having said that, I find that men who are living at the level of the self or the soul rather than the level of ego do in fact show empathy every bit as much as females do. I believe that they have the same capacity and the power they have when they have empathy causes it to have a far greater influence than women's expression of empathy. I don't know that it is encouraged in most cultures because it's not. Uh, but we do find certain segments of the population where it is encouraged and where you do see men every bit as empathetic as women are.
Is that, do you believe that empathy is something that can be learned, or if they're not exposed to it in the first few years of childhood, that it's not something that they can learn?
The three things that are necessary for us to have the ego strength, and again, the language here is important. A person with great ego need is someone with a weak ego. A person with ego strength is someone with a strong ego. And the three things necessary to have a strong ego are a sense of the safety of your existence in the first few years of life. It is having caretakers, primary caretakers, who are able to set aside their own needs to meet your basic needs, which means you are fed, you are clothed, you are taken to the doctor when you're ill. And the third thing that's necessary is a sense of your own self-worth. Now, listening to that, you recognize, okay, in the United States, we're not in a war zone. Probably those first two things people get most of the time. A sense of the relative safety of their existence, and they're not hungry. That third is totally dependent on your circumstance and the family of origin of which you're a part, whether or not you have that sense of self-worth. It's been my privilege to speak with TED speakers right after they've been chosen to speak for TED, to talk with them about the experience, what they can expect. And one of the things invariably that they will say is, I don't know why I've been chosen. I shouldn't be here. There's nothing about me that makes me worthy of being a TED speaker. I find that 99% of the time, the smartest, most capable people on earth have imposter syndrome because it is almost ubiquitous to the human experience. Men are less likely to have it than women, but men do experience it at very high levels as well. I remember one woman a couple of years ago who just didn't want to get off of it. She just kept saying, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm here. I finally stopped her and said, correct me if I'm wrong, but of the 43 people here, I'm pretty sure you're the only one who just got back from the International Space Station and the only one whose husband is there right now. So maybe you do deserve to be here. The thing I like about seeing that is the great theologian Henry Nouwen said that the greatest humans throughout history have had the paradoxical strengths of great confidence coupled with great humility. And that's what we see consistently. The curators at TED are amazing, and the people who end up speaking have great confidence coupled with great humility. And that is a sign of somebody with ego strength, not great ego need. And therefore, it's also a sign of someone who's going to be able to show empathy.
I love that. Very few people are able to actually say it the way you just did, and it makes so much sense. It's
Yeah, it
fantastic.
does.
It's
Good.
fantastic. When you look at younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, do you see a different understanding of gender and equality?
I believe I do. Yes. Gender is far more fluid for that generation. It is a good thing for the most part that they are able to explore their gender identity during their teen years with impunity. It is much more difficult now, of course, in our current political environment. And there are excesses of the left as well as excesses of the right, the far right. So that is always a concern to those of us who are therapists. But I believe that there is a much more concern for equity as well as equality. Uh, and the difference is with equity, you're recognizing that uh, I started closer to the finish line than you did because I started as a white male. And so equity is not just that we have equal chances. Equity is that some of us have greater opportunities than others. And so I do believe that we see much more concern for equality. I'm not sure we're seeing a lot of change in equity.
I agree. I think that my generation specifically has taken on the notion of inclusivity as being this the big finish line, right? Like we got there. As long as everything's inclusive, it's okay, but we really still struggle with everyday equity. And this tension between like wanting to honor the progress we've made, but realizing it's still not enough. How do you personally measure the progress? Is it policy? Is it language, representation? What does it look like to you?
Well, it's hard to follow data because most of the data is not quantitative, it's qualitative, and that's always more slippery. So I don't know that I feel like we really are very well measuring it right now. I speak all over the world to corporations, and I find certain professions tend to be a lot better in working toward equity than others. For instance, the publishing industry is very equitable. And uh, in fact, I would say even female heavy, whereas the banking industry is the opposite. There are some that are better, some that are worse.
I want to jump around a little and I want to talk about women supporting women. In your talks, you've often, you shared the small moments. I love that moment that you shared. You probably didn't like it that much. It was annoying, but when you were getting on a plane and you went to go sit in your seat, whether it was 4C or something, and the guy behind you kept telling you that you were in the wrong seat, that was his seat. And then the guy behind him finally said something, effing lady, just get this, in your seat, get out of there, it's his, until the stewardess came by, looked at your boarding passes, and of course that was your seat. And you got to sit next to both of these guys. Now, I mean, those are humorous stories, but they also reveal something. Now that you've lived as both a man and woman, have you noticed a difference in how women support each other?
Absolutely. Men do support one another. Men come into a room. The first thing they do is determine who the alpha is in the room. Then they rank themselves accordingly, generously, I might add. And then they set about accomplishing the purpose of the alpha. That's how they do it. And they empower one another. Empowerment is a big part of what men do for one another. My experience is that women do not. That women see each other as competition. And I think I understand the reason for that. The average white woman in America earns 83 cents on the dollar of what the average white man earns in America. 6.6% of Silicon Valley CEOs are women. 5.8% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. 22% of Fortune 500 senior vice presidents are women. 2% of Hollywood directors, 11% of writers, 19% of producers are women. 47% of first and second year law associates are women, and yet only 15% make partner. I mean, I can go on and on. So there's not just a feeling of scarcity, there's actual scarcity. But it doesn't help when women are not supportive of one another. I was talking about this in an interview with the Washington Post a few years ago, and the reporter said, "That's not been my experience at all." I said, "That's great. It's wonderful. I'm so glad it's not." And again, in the world of journalism, that's often the case. But I said, in print journalism, but I said, that is my experience. Well, it was a 2-day interview. I was coming back the second day for the photograph session. And she said, I have to apologize to you. I was talking to Madeleine Albright last night, as one does. This is several years ago when she was still living. And she said, I told her what she said. And she said, oh, yeah, I agree with Paula 100%. Don't you remember all the times I've said there's a special place in hell reserved for women who do not empower one another?
I've quoted that several times.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And, it is uh, alarming to me how often that's the case. I have a friend who was a undersecretary of health in New Zealand for many years, and then was the head of the Department of Health in British Columbia for, I think, a decade. And she's about my age, and we're very close. And when I was going through a particularly difficult time with female coworkers in one of my settings, she said, you missed an important part of female learning. You missed the mean girl phase of junior high school. And she was not saying it as any kind of a joke. I mean, it was dead serious. Girls can be spectacularly mean to each other. I watch it with my granddaughters. And boys just don't do that. So girls can be, mean girls is it's a real thing, and they continue into adulthood. And I did not know how to deal with that. So for me, that has been a very difficult thing to have to adapt to, and it's frustrating because it's guys do, like I said, they empower one another. They, when it's time to take down the alpha, they take down the alpha, and then try to replace the alpha with themselves. But that actually doesn't happen all that often. For the most part, they find um, people to mentor, and they find proteges, and they build them up. And women are not as inclined to do that.
No, it's almost like we're begging for scraps, so we have to fight for them sometimes.
Yeah,
That's what it
I
feels
think
like.
that's the reason. I think that's the primary reason it happens.
But one of the questions, I mean, I found that throughout my career, as far as women not supporting, I've had some who do, but I've had some who really have not. But did you have that perception prior?
I think I knew it existed because I knew that my wife was much more comfortable working with men than she was with women. She was very quiet, very private, and was also very physically attractive. And that's another thing I've noticed is physically attractive women are treated differently, not just by men who give them preferential treatment, but by other women who do not give them preferential treatment. And so I think I thought at the time, well, part of that's probably Kathy. And then, once I transitioned, it's like, nope, that is in fact just the way that women are with one another. And Kathy couldn't stand it, so she just stayed out of those primarily female social circles.
That's
So
so
do you think,
interesting.
go ahead. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Molly.
sorry, Sylvia. I just that's so interesting to me because as a millennial, that I've not had that experience at all. I did get the mean girl phase in junior high and high school, right? But I've had the opposite experience. I mean, maybe that's some sort of data there, anecdotal, qualitative data that things are changing, but that might just be the nature too of my profession and just the types of women that I've surrounded myself with. But most of the women that I've had in my life, professionally and personally, there's been like a shared understanding that culture was created by men and by patriarchy. And I think that we're fighting together within that system rather than against each other. But yeah, that's just really interesting to hear to me that that your wife had that experience. I guess I think I take for granted that it's different now for me.
Yeah, for her, that was in the education system. She now is a therapist, and I've not really ever talked about whether she sees it in her current employment. It's interesting to me. I'm very active politically at this point and considering running for mayor this next term. I'm mayor pro tem now, which is the number two. And I uh, give a keynote to 35 Front Range mayors from the Front Range of Colorado back in January. It was about half male, half female. And that is an area where I find women really supporting one another a lot. And I think that's wonderful.
I love that. And congratulations if you're thinking about running. That's big public service. So thank you.
It
And
is, like my good friend and our current mayor says, nobody wakes up when they're 10 and says, "Mom, I want to be a mayor when I grow up."
okay, so I have a question for you. What do you wish women understood about men, and the opposite? What do you wish men understood about women? After everything you've lived.
It's interesting. In my first couple of years living as Paula, I had pretty quick answers for that. As time has gone on, I don't, because I think it's so individual and just so personal. It is, I think the one general thing I wish guys knew is that they started a hell of a lot closer to the finish line than all the women in their lives, whoever they are. And so, yes, you worked hard for what you got, but just started halfway to the finish line. And so I don't think hardly any of them understand their entitlement. And that's not, there's no way they could because it's all they've ever known. And so I don't begrudge them their confidence, but I do wish they understood how much easier it is for them. I think that's the thing. With women, I think the thing I might say the most is, particularly if they're straight and married, uh, your husband cannot identify his emotions. He cannot identify his feelings. There are six core emotions: happiness, sadness, surprise, disgust, fear, and anger. Men cannot identify their emotions except for anger. And then there are about 180 feelings, depending on who's counting them, that relate to those emotions. And so they will expect their spouse to be the mirror to them for the emotions. And the spouse then carries the anger, carries the fury, carries the disappointment, carries the sadness. And the husband's good with that. It's like, yeah, that's how I'm feeling. Thanks, because I didn't know what to do with it. And I would say to the women, don't do it. Tell your husband he's got to figure out what his own feelings are. That you're not the one who's supposed to tell him what he feels. He's got to figure out what he feels. And it's something I see. I work with a lot of C-suite males in my counseling practice, and I mean, I'll have to ask a question 10 times about, how do you feel about this? And they just keep coming back to what they think. And it's like, I don't want to know what you think about it. They cannot identify their feelings.
Paula, first of all, thank you for validating all of my theories. um, as a divorced woman, correct me if I'm wrong, but I
Well,
think I remember.
I'm gonna stop you just for a second
Yeah.
and confessionally say, post transition, I've been in two relationships, and I'm still very close with Kathy. So in all three, with my former wife and with my current girlfriend, with my previous girlfriend, um, all three of them have said to me, as Paula, I'm not here to feel your feelings for you. You got to feel your own feelings. Because in that regard, I think I'm still very male.
But the self-awareness is the key, right? I think that at some point, I don't remember if it was one of your talks or something I read, but you described empathy as something you practice, it being almost kind of like a muscle. And if you don't intentionally use it, it kind of atrophies. What kind of practices do you think actually strengthens empathy? And for those of us that are raising sons or trying to navigate any sort of social and emotional relationship with cis straight men, really, yeah, what do you think strengthens it?
I believe asking them a lot of questions, that really being a therapist, playing therapist, asking a lot of questions that are designed to get them to go to the right hemisphere of the human brain, that sees things more holistic. The It's interesting. We hold babies in the crook of the left arm, whether we're right-handed or left-handed. We hold
No,
babies in the crook of the left arm.
Me too.
Most
I,
humans do.
thank you.
The
I'm just
majority
not.
do. Yeah,
Blowing
I
the
my
can't.
majority
mind.
do.
Yeah.
And that's regardless of culture, age, language, ethnicity. The reason for that is so the child sees the left side of the human face. The left side of the human face is controlled by the right hemisphere, and the left side of the human face is far more expressive than the right side of the human face. So again, the left side of the face is controlled by the right hemisphere. And so babies see, they learn empathy, they learn to read a face long before they learn language. And that's why we're inclined to do that. Anything that encourages others to be able to read a face is a good thing.
So I have to start carrying my grandson in my other arm. Um,
Infants, primarily infants. Yeah.
well, yeah, I can't carry the other one. He's almost as big as I am. Um, okay, fine. So on Saturday when I see him, I'll get and I'm
I,
left-handed.
I even carry my
Yeah.
cat
If
in
you,
that.
if you, the source of that is a psychiatrist and neuroscientist who teaches at Oxford, Ian McGilchrist, and his book, The Master and His Emissary, which is uh, really the definitive book on the hemispheres of the brain and how they operate. For instance, one of the things that is an assumption that is wrong is that women operate more in the right hemisphere, men in the left. It's not true at all.
Okay. Molly, as we close out, you have anything that you want to ask Paula before?
Yeah, I think just as an overarching thing with all of your varied work, the mosaic of what you've created and your good work, I think So many of us crave conversations that aren't immediately divided along political lines. It seems pretty impossible right now, but we still crave human connection and that ability to discuss and converse and exchange ideas, right? What have you learned about how to keep dialogue open, especially when people start from such different worldviews in your work? And how does that relate to the empathy piece that we're talking about building?
We're a narrative-based species. You don't sleep without dreaming. You don't dream in mathematical equations. You dream in stories. We spend 6 years of our life dreaming stories. When we remain at a story level in conversation, we avoid the debates that come from polarization. On our town board, there's one board member with whom I rarely see eye to eye, but we both love baseball. And so we'll talk about what happened the day before with whatever team the day before. And that takes you out of the realm of debate on political issues and brings you to your common humanity. We got together a few weeks ago, and he told me a lot about his, I asked him a lot of questions. He told me a lot about his deeper story. And suddenly I understood, oh, okay, this is a person of very high character. I've always known that. But now I know why sometimes he can be a real bulldog, once he gets a hold of an idea, whether I think it's a good idea or not. Wouldn't have known that if I hadn't heard his story. So I think that's the most effective way for us to do it, is to find ourselves in environments where we are able to speak our own story and hear the stories of others.
Paula, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. First of all, where could people find out more about you? And
Sure, paulastonewilliams.com is the easiest place to find me.
well, again, I want to thank you. And this episode is very special, and it's going to actually drop right before the new year, because I think it's it's something that, well, because I think that's where it belongs. So that's it. I have no bigger words than that to say.
A
Paula,
nice, a
thank you so
nice
much.
bookend, right? Nice bookend to the year.
Good. I am happy to have been with you.
What stayed with you about Paula's story?
Oh, definitely how clearly she described losing credibility after her transition. Like the fact that she could literally feel the difference in how people treated her. Same person, same brain, but just because of her gender. It really made all the invisible things women deal with impossible to ignore. I just found that to be God, if everyone just listened to her TED Talk, if all men, all cis men could just listen to her TED Talk and just start from there, that's a great starting point.
The way she talked about not only what she experienced, which she really didn't realize when she was in the Brooks Brothers suit and was the white male in the room, um, but talking about uh, empathy and talking about women supporting women and what how we're just pitted really against one another in certain areas. Her just whole experience just puts so many things into perspective
Yeah.
as just a straight white female. And talking about uh, what children learn and the differences, to me, was huge. It was so eye opening.
Yeah, I love that she talked about empathy as something. I mean, she touched a little bit on like the gender as a construct and then with some influences from biology, right? But like also as something that you can learn, like not something you just feel, it's not soft, it's a skill. And it made me think how often we confuse empathy with sometimes with just being nice when it's really about curiosity and expanding your perspective and I think that it like curiosity, it really gives me a lot of good ammunition, I think, when I consider how I'm raising my own kids and how we socialize boys. I think that's a big piece of for me. I'm always forward thinking with like, what are we learning from Paula's experience that I can pass down, that you can pass down to your grandkids and to your kids? And that piece of empathy and putting that into practice is one of the things that is going to reshape how we operate under patriarchy, I think.
So do I. So do I. I mean, the conversation was amazing. And she reminds us that perspective changes everything, and empathy, once experienced, can't be unlearned. Can be learned, but can't be unlearned, which I think is so absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, anything else? Or, uh,
I mean, I feel really hopeful, I think, hearing from Paula and listening to her talks and reading her work. I'm always cautious about finding optimism, because it's so easy to be disappointed. But stories like Paula's, visibility is shifting, right? When people share their stories like she talked about, it's not just data, it's qualitative, it's narrative, it's how people share their stories, especially ones that challenge what we think we know. I think empathy scales like she was talking about. And that's what gives me hope. So I appreciate anywhere I can find hope.
well, I think, again, this has been great. And what a way to end our season. As we close our first season of The Woman's Current, I keep coming back to the story of Paula Stone Williams, and how she reminded us that understanding changes everything.
Yeah, every woman we've spoken with this season adds to that current, right? Of empathy, of courage, of possibility.
Definitely. And this is the right time to remind everyone that even though season 1 we're going to take a short hiatus, but this is the right moment. If you've missed any episodes or want to hear them again, each one another ripple in the tide that is turning.
You can find The Women's Current wherever you listen to podcasts and full video episodes on YouTube.
And we'll be back soon with season 2. More stories, more voices, and proof that change keeps moving forward.
Thanks for being part of this journey with us. And from both of us,
Happy holidays and a happy new year. This has been a Life of Prey production.